Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Brian, and this is Our Weird World. So it's November 1st today as I'm recording this. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get an episode out last week leading up to Halloween. I had a very hectic week, very busy. I didn't have a lot of free time to be able to record anything. I apologize about that to all my regular listeners. I appreciate you, uh, all that are subscribed and listen regularly. Yeah, I do appreciate it. So thank you. So I'm trying to get some episodes out. I wanted to keep on the theme of kind of the Halloween stuff, spooky things, hauntings, etc., because I wasn't able to get that episode out last week, get anything out last week. So I thought I'd go back and do some stories on some spooky stuff, some hauntings, etc., things like that. Yeah, so I thought it'd be fun to keep in the theme of hauntings and spooky stuff, even though Halloween just happened. I have some other stuff planned here for November that going to be more into true crime events, things like that. But still, I wanted to get some of these spooky stuff. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to look at some haunted places actually here where I live. So I live in a town called Rio Rancho in New Mexico, which is just northwest of Albuquerque. If you live in the area or are familiar with it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But for those that don't, I know I have a lot of listeners on the other side of the country, and I have a lot of people up in the uh, UK area. So thanks for listening. I have a lot of listeners in Belgium. That's awesome. Even some people out in the Middle East and even in Asia. So thank you. I'm glad you're listening. Hope you're enjoying it. So for those of you that aren't familiar, Albuquerque is basically in the center of New Mexico in the southwest portion of the U.S. Albuquerque is the largest city here in New Mexico. It's the most populous. It is not the capital. Santa Fe is actually the state capital, which is about give or take an hour north of Albuquerque. But like I said, I live in Rio Rancho, which is just outside of Albuquerque. I can drive literally 5 minutes and be in Albuquerque. But like for example, if I wanted to go to the airport, it's about 45 minutes from my house. It just gives you kind of a rough idea of where I live. But Albuquerque itself and this part of the US is a very older part of the country, even before the US became a country. Albuquerque has actually been a city for over 300 years now. Our country hasn't even been a country that long. So Albuquerque is like, it's kind of this crossroads of a lot of different cultures coming together. There's a lot of Native American culture from the indigenous Native Americans that have lived here for centuries, as well as a lot of Spanish culture from the Spaniards that came over. There's a lot of European culture here. There's a lot of Germans that came over. I know a lot of Germans found their way to Texas. That's where a lot of my family comes from. But you still see a lot of that even here. But most of what you see here tends to be a lot of Native American, Spanish, and also, of course, Mexican, because we're right on the Mexico border. There's a huge influence of Mexican culture here as well. It's actually really nice if you're into those type of cultures, Spanish, Mexican, Native American. There's a lot of really cool stuff out here. A lot of great, rich history. But with that, because there's so much of this history and some it goes back centuries, there's bound to be a lot of bad things. There's a lot of conflict and wars that happened here in this part of the world, in this part of our country. So you're going to tend to get a lot of, I guess you could say, evil or bad spirits or bad energy, I guess you could say, around certain areas, certain places, certain things, if you will. So that's kind of what I want to talk about here today is within my hometown of Albuquerque. I was actually born and raised here. I've lived in other parts of the country. I know I mentioned in previous episodes I was in the U.S. Navy. I got to live in Virginia. I got to live in San Diego. I've been all around the world. When I was in the Navy, got to see a lot of different stuff. But I did come back to Albuquerque. I do like it here. I know sometimes I complain about it to friends and family, but I guess that's to be expected anywhere you live. You're gonna find something negative about it. But overall, I do like living here. It is a very nice place. But again, there's all this history, so there's bound to be some pretty good stories of like haunted places or hauntings or things like that, right? Sure, yeah, of course. That's exactly what I want to talk about today. So I want to talk about some of the, I guess, more popular or infamous ones, I guess you could say, here in Albuquerque. Again, if you're from here, if you've been here, you might be familiar with some of these places. But for those of you that aren't, I hope you can get a little bit out of this. If you ever come here, maybe go check out some of these places. I've been to most of these, not all of them, but I've been to a lot of these places I'm going to talk about, and they are just from a tourist kind of aspect. They're really neat to just go check out and take a look. They're cool places. So the first place I actually want to talk about is a place called the Church Street Cafe. Now, I've been here personally. It's a great little cafe. They have really good food. If you're ever in Albuquerque, go check them out. They're near the what's called the Old Town area of Albuquerque. It's literally because it's like the older part of Albuquerque, so they call it Old Town. Really nice place. There's really cool stuff down there. It can be a bit touristy. Certain times of year, it can be very busy with out of towners, but I mean, it's to be expected. But yeah, it is a very nice older part of town. But this cafe is I definitely recommend it. They have very good food, so go check it out if you're ever here. So the Church Street Cafe originally was not a cafe. It was actually a private residence that had 18 rooms in it, and it was considered a hacienda. Those are very common types of homes here in the Southwest. Now, had actually been built originally back in the early 1700s, again as a private residence for a family called the Ruiz family. Excuse me, Ruiz, Ruiz. Now, this family home became known as Casa de Ruiz because it was a family residence for this family in the area. And it stayed within the Ruiz family for almost 200 years. Actually, I guess it would actually be over 200 years when I mention here what I'm going to say in just a moment. So yeah, just over 200 years it stayed within this Ruiz family, original Ruiz family. That's pretty awesome that you can have a house that stays within a family for over 200 years. Now, it is actually, because of this, it's actually considered to be one of the oldest buildings, not just in Albuquerque, but in the entire state of New Mexico. So it has a lot of rich history going back with the Ruiz family. I wasn't able to find a whole lot on it, just within that aspect as being a family residence. It was just a private family residence for a couple hundred years. It didn't stay this way because up until the early 90s, there was a woman by the name of Rufina Ruiz, and she passed away at the age of 91 years old. She was the last living Ruiz family member in this house. Now, of course, once she passed away, the home came up for sale on the market. Shortly after she passed, a woman by the name of Maria or Marie, I saw conflicting reports from what I was able to find, Maria or Marie. Anyways, most of what I saw named her as Maria Coleman, purchased the house and actually wanted to renovate it into what is now this Church Street Cafe. She had this plan of renovating it into a restaurant, turning into this place called the Church Street Cafe. But because this house had such an old history with this family, it's believed that the spirits of her mother, Sarah Ruiz, was actually in the home at even at the time when Rufina lived there, but wasn't any sort of like there was nothing bad that happened. She wasn't wasn't thought of being like evil or anything like that. But once the house was sold and Maria Coleman bought it and wanted to renovate it, it's said that the spirit of Sarah Ruiz started coming out more and was not happy. Um, she had a hard time finding contractors that would do the job, that would actually take the job and renovate because of this history with this house. Once she was able to find someone to agree to do the contract and renovate this house, they the contractors themselves excuse me, had a lot of interruptions with just things with like materials and tools being misplaced. They'd have a whatever power tool, whatever they have, they're going to do something, and they'd set it down or whatever, and they'd come back and it'd be somewhere else. It'd be moved around. They'd have to look around and find it. It's believed that the spirit of Sarah was moving these things around to disrupt them because she wasn't happy with them being there, tearing up her home. I mean, can you blame her? It's her family home, yeah, and she lived there and passed away there, and so did her daughter. They, and going back a couple hundred years. So, sure, it makes sense. You're gonna have these spirits that are gonna be in this residence, and now it's totally being changed. They're not gonna be happy about it, right? So, it's also from Maria. She's actually described that she's seen a female apparition that is believed to be Sarah Ruiz and would actually scream at her, saying, "quote Get him out of here now." Basically, talking about like the contractors that were there working, basically saying, "Get them out! Like I don't want these men in my house, tearing my house up and working on it." So later, eventually, Maria she actually started to communicate with Sarah's spirit and actually seemed to come to some sort of a agreement or a truce, if you will. So she just started talking to her. I can imagine it was probably a lot of just like talking within the house, uh, almost like to herself, but directing it towards the spirit of Sarah. And basically, yeah, I wasn't able to find any exact like transcripts per se of what she said, but you can imagine like she's probably telling her, hey, I'm not here to try to do anything bad. I want to turn your home into a cafe and bring something to the people that live here and the people that come and visit. So it seems like there was like I said a truce between Maria and the spirit of Sarah. So that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty neat that they were able to that she did that she recognized and saw that there's this spirit here that's kind of wreaking havoc on them as they're trying to renovate. And she said, "Hey, I know you're here, but can we work together? Can you let me do this? I understand that, you're unfortunately your family's all passed on, but can you let us come in here and do this and create this cafe?" So pretty neat story. Now it is said that the spirit of Sarah is still there. Um, there have actually been employees that say that they will often see an apparition of basically what is described as Sarah Ruiz. They'll often say that she's in a long black dress, and there's even been customers that have reported feeling her presence as well in the cafe while they're there dining. Now, like I said, I've been there myself. It's a great little cafe. I personally have never experienced or seen or heard anything while I was there. Perhaps I wasn't really looking or searching for that sort of thing, but maybe I'll have to go back there sometime and see if I can catch anything unusual or see anything or hear anything. But I thought that was a pretty cool one to start with. It's a kind of a neat story of, like I said, going back with this rich history of our city and our state here. And and I thought you all would enjoy that. It's pretty cool. So yeah, like I said, if you're ever in town, go check it out. It's a great little cafe. They have awesome food. So the next one I want to talk about, it's gonna be really short. This one's actually a lot shorter story, but it's super. I was gonna say famous, but I guess more infamous would probably be a better word. Um, we have a theater here in downtown Albuquerque called the Chemo Theater. Another great location if you're ever here in town. I highly recommend checking it out. I've been there to see shows. They put on live performances. Most recently, I believe it was 2019. I took my daughter to see it was a Peter Pan production that was put on by a local children's theater. Supports it. It's all for like a fundraising event, and they put on it's really cool. They put on shows here locally, and they did this one at Chemo Theater that was Peter Pan, and I took my daughter, and she absolutely loved it. The cool thing was I was able to do it through my work. The company that I work for, we actually sponsor a lot of local theaters and churches, and provide them with a lot of our products. And so in return, they tend to will give us either free or discounted tickets to go see shows. So they gave us an opportunity to go see the show as employees because we support them. So I took my daughter. So that's cool. I really like that. It's really neat. But again, Chemo Theater, awesome little local theater. If you ever have a chance to go see a show there, I highly recommend it. It's a really cool place. The building is fantastic. Just the architecture of it alone, it's a really beautiful building. Even if you're just walking around downtown Albuquerque on Central, just go walk by it, check it out. It's a really cool looking place. I highly recommend it. But if you can see a show, definitely go see a show. So, what are we talking about as far as hauntings or spooky stuff at the Chemo Theater? So, it's actually considered to be probably one of the most haunted locations in Albuquerque. And this most infamous haunting is actually, unfortunately, a pretty tragic story of this young boy named Bobby Darnell. I believe it's pronounced Darnell. Darnell, Darnall, Bobby Darnell. I'm just going to call him Bobby. So, anyways, Bobby was believed to be about 6 years old at the time. I say believe, he was, from reports. Bobby was 6 years old at the time, and unfortunately, he was killed backstage at the chemo theater because there was actually a hot water pipe from a boiler, uh, where a boiler heater. That's what was very common back then, still is in some properties. And unfortunately, it actually exploded in 1951, killing him because he was basically right near it, and it killed him during this explosion. So it is said that he now haunts the theater and the staff and the performers there at the theater. So to appease his spirit and keep him from messing with production, this is kind of a cool story. The staff and the performers will actually leave a donut or donuts backstage for Bobby during performances, typically on the opening night. But I saw other reports that said they would do it every night, every performance. They would leave donuts backstage for Bobby, basically as like a, hey, we're gonna put on the show. Here's a treat for you. Just hang out. Try not to do anything. So basically, the idea is that they'll leave out a donut, they'll do the show, they'll come back, the donut's gone. So it's believed that Bobby gets this donut as a little treat. He's happy, he eats it, hangs out backstage, enjoys the show. Show goes on, no problems. But it's said that should they forget to put out a donut for Bobby, things start going wrong. They start having issues with the lighting, with the sound equipment, having malfunctions, things not working properly. So, of course, they're like, "Hey, we need to put a treat out there for this young man Bobby to keep him happy during the show." He is probably the most, like I said, infamous spirit there at Chemo Theater, but there are certainly others that are believed to be there as well at the theater. Again, I've been there myself personally. I've seen shows. I've never seen or experienced anything there. I'm guessing they must have left donuts out during the shows that I've been to, so I certainly hope they did. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, Now the chemo theater has been around for about 100 years now. It opened in the 1920s. There's a really good history on that building itself. If you want to go look it up and check it out, it's pretty cool. I don't want to really get into the history of the building itself, but it's about 100 years old now. It opened in the early 1920s, so I just thought that was a pretty cool story with little Bobby there. It's unfortunate, such a young child, that accident happened and killed him, but it's kind of neat to see that where you have these people that they'll put out a donut for him as a treat to make him happy during a show. That's kind of fun, I guess. But as long as nobody's getting hurt and everything's okay, cool. So the next one I want to talk about is called Hotel Andaluz. It's spelled Andaluz, Andaluz. So the gentleman Conrad Hilton is actually from New Mexico, and this hotel Andaluz in Albuquerque was actually one of his first hotels that he helped build. It's actually the fourth hotel in his portfolio. So that's kind of cool. That's a pretty neat little bit of history there. The Hilton name is global, right? Everybody knows that name, right? You see the Hilton hotels and all that, the Hilton dynasty, if you will. So it's pretty neat seeing that history of it coming back to New Mexico. So it's his fourth hotel on his portfolio. That's pretty neat. It actually opened back in 1939 and was the first building in New Mexico to have air conditioning. Sweet, awesome. Way back in 1939. Over the years, the hotel went through various renovations and upgrades, obviously to keep up with the times. It's actually now featured on the National Register. Excuse me, it is now on the National Registration of Historical Places. Now, of course, with it being a Hilton hotel, no shortage of luxury, right? From everything I've seen and pictures I've seen, it is a very, very pretty, grandiose type of building, right? But there's also apparently a lot of paranormal activity in the building. So guests that stay at the hotel will actually often complain that their jewelry has been moved around during the night, and many have actually complained of being woken up by the sound of a woman screaming. Now, I tried to look into some of the more history of this, like who these spirits are that are moving the jewelry or this screaming woman. I couldn't really find anything on it. If you know any more, please let me know. I'd love to know if you have any specifics about it. But I just think it's kind of cool that hearing these stories of people say, "Oh yeah, my jewelry's been moved," or hearing a woman screaming. Anyways, I just thought that'd be a fun one to add to this tale. Now, another one that I want to add is again another pretty well known one here. Even the name alone, a lot of people know this name here, is the Carrie Tingley Children's Hospital. Now, the Carrie Tingley Children's Hospital is like it sounds. It's a children's hospital. They help kids, and they actually do a lot of very good stuff here in Albuquerque and within New Mexico for children, for helping children. So, of course, it's an older building. It was first opened in 1910 by Clyde Tingley and his wife, Carrie Wooster Tingley. That's where it gets its name, Carrie Tingley. Children were treated here for obviously a variety of different ailments. Back then, of course, unfortunately, tuberculosis was running rampant, scoliosis, spina bifida. Those are just a few of the things that they would treat children for. The currently now in modern days, the children is actually has been merged with the UNM medical facilities that we have here. UNM is the University of New Mexico, and they do have a large medical facility here that also do a lot of good stuff here in the area. Not just being a hospital, but helping support things like this, like the Carrie Tingley Children's Hospital. Um, but of course, unfortunately, the spirits and ghosts of the past linger here in this building. You can imagine it being a hospital. Unfortunately, people do die, right? So there's been reports that in some of the sections of the building that are no longer in use, people report seeing glowing lights that coming from under doors, apparitions, hearing things, seeing things moving. There are also reports of what people describe as like energy fields or like barriers that almost make it difficult to pass through certain doorways or hallways within the building. That's kind of interesting report, and it's come from multiple reports that people have these experiences where they'll be walking through a part of the hospital and they'll try to go through a doorway or down a hallway to another area, and they almost feel like they're something there that they can't see is being imposed upon them, and they can't continue forward. Now, in the oldest parts of the hospital, people have actually reported that they experience hearing disembodied voices. And here's a good spooky one, even the sounds of crying children. Now, that's one that in any story I've ever heard, hear about crying children. That's just how it just gives it gives me chills thinking about it. It's like, are these the spirits of children that died because of something traumatic, some traumatic ailment that they had, and now their spirits are stuck here, and they're sad that they're stuck, that their spirits are stuck within here. So yeah, I've listened to other stories and podcasts about tales that have unfortunately have children in them, and you hear that a lot about crying children. That's just every time I hear about it, it's like it definitely spooks me. Anyway, so other reports say that people have actually heard like uh like sounds of heartbeats, and even almost like described as like when you have like a pregnant woman has an ultrasound and you hear the heartbeat of the baby. They say they describe it like that, almost like that's the kind of sound that they're hearing. That's kind of a spooky one, right? Thinking about that, you hear this bump 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 bump, as you're in the hospital or walking around or going somewhere or whatever. Yeah, that definitely would spook me too, along with the crying children. um, and then lastly, there have been incidences where people have, of course, seen figures. Now, of these accounts, most have described these figures as wearing black robes, typically in the darker parts of the building or in dark hallways, roaming around the hospital. So, imagine that you're walking around this hospital, maybe you're working there, it's nighttime, you're on the night shift, you're a nurse, you're security, whatever, and you hear this ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump heartbeat sound, and then maybe later you hear the sounds of crying child, and then you see some sort of figure in a black robe, if you will, walking through a hallway. Oh, yeah, that definitely, just thinking about that gives me chills. Like I said, in some of these other places that I've been to, I've never been to Carrie Tingley Hospital. I've never been inside there, so I'm not familiar with this. Those are a lot of the things, incidences that in my research, found that people see and hear there. So sounds like they got some pretty good spooky stuff going on there. Obviously, it's a very old building. Again, it was built in 1910, so it's very old. Again, it's a hospital. Unfortunately, people do die in hospitals, so there's going to be a lot of probably very negative and bad energy in there. So you can imagine the kind of things like this that people are experiencing. I definitely am a believer that probably going to see and hear things like that in there. And I'm going to mention here in a little bit, towards the end of this, some of my own personal experiences, why I believe in this sort of stuff. The next one I want to talk about is a really good one. I've never personally been here, but I've heard a lot of stuff about it. Apparently, it's difficult to get in there, but we actually have an abandoned insane asylum, if you will, here in Albuquerque. And this also is considered to be one of the most haunted places in Albuquerque. But it is, I know it is pretty well secured and can be difficult to get in there, but people still manage to get in there, probably hop a fence or whatever, but it can be difficult to get there. Um, but there are still a lot of people here, locals, that aren't familiar with this abandoned asylum. Currently, it is actually owned by neighbors that they do take trespassing very seriously. If you're thinking about going down there and trying to do some ghost hunting, I would definitely discourage it. I know I've seen a lot of reports online of people, being arrested for trespassing because the neighbors will see people trying to get in, or that will break in, or that's my warning I'm putting out there. If you live here, or if you're in the area, don't try to go in there and do something, because they do have no trespassing signs all over, and apparently the people that own it are very serious about that, not wanting people to get in there. Anyways, there have been people that have managed to get in there, risk themselves and trespassing and all that, to experiencing some paranormal activities. There's one very common story that I saw in a lot of different reports, that people will see a large black figure who will actually follow people that enter the asylum. So if you're with like a group of people going in, other people that are like towards the back of your group, if there's a few of you, will have reports of saying that they see this large black figure, like almost like a shadow figure, following people into the building. There actually have been photographs of this captured. If you have a chance to get online and check it out, go look at some of these photos. They're pretty creepy. It's definitely worth a look if you want to give yourself a good spook looking at some photos. So yeah, go check it out. Go search it. You can find some good ones. I'll see if maybe I'll try to add one and post it as the image for this episode. Maybe I think that'd be a pretty good one. So there are some pretty good spooky ones. I looked up some. They're pretty cool. Now there's also a lot of people that do believe that these hauntings can actually be placed on pretty much one person, a doctor. There is a doctor that is referred to as, quote, Dr. Samuel. Now, this Dr. Samuel supposedly was conducting inhumane experiments on a lot of his patients, often killing them in the process. Now, of course, if you got a doctor that's doing experiments on patients and they're dying as a result of it, you're going to get a lot of bad energy in there. And yeah, sure, you're going to get a lot of probably very unusual paranormal activity. Black figures such as this don't surprise me at all. You're probably going to have reports of people even being, I don't want to speculate too much, but you're going to have things happen, of course, with that sort of bad energy. It's often thought that the bodies of these people that died because of Dr. Samuel's experiments would just be dumped in the basement and would sit there to later be disposed of. So they've died as a result of some of these experiments, and then their physical bodies are just thrown in the basement, just disregarded, whatever, as trash, and then they later dispose of them as they're rotting. So that, yeah, I can see bringing a lot of bad negative energy into this facility. So when these crimes were uncovered, the doctor, actually this Dr. Samuel, he actually went down to the basement and actually killed himself. He actually hung himself later after this. So you've got all this from the people that he was experimenting on, and then he went and committed suicide himself in the basement. Yeah, you can imagine it's gonna bring a lot of negative energy. So I personally would love to go there and check it out. I think it'd be neat to do some ghost hunting there, but again, because they do take trespassing very seriously, I'm not going to go risk that for myself. I'm not going to put myself in that situation just from that alone. I don't want to deal with that, potentially get myself in trouble, but I think it'd be pretty neat. There's a lot of stuff out there about this place you can look up online. There's stories, there's all kinds of stuff. Yeah, if you're interested in more, check it out, but pretty cool place, pretty interesting history. Now, the last place I want to talk about is another hotel. This is a hotel called Park Central. Now, it's one of the more grand hotels we have here in New Mexico. It's a it's a very neat, pretty looking building. Um, but again, of course, it's considered to be one of the very haunted places we have here in Albuquerque. Now, there is a rooftop lounge up there that has great views of the city. If you ever, I've never been to this hotel, but if you ever stay there or want to go there to this rooftop lounge, check it out. It does have some pretty good views. I saw some images of it online. It's pretty cool. We have stunning mountain views here of our Sandia Mountains here in Albuquerque, and it's so open here. There's great sunsets, etc. Just yeah. So, anyways, this is a good spot to get good views of that. But of course, it's an older building and has its paranormal side. So, the building itself originally served as a hospital for railroad employees. Back in the 1980s, it was actually renamed to the Memorial Hospital and had a psychiatric unit. Even then, there were claims of hauntings back then already. Now, some of these psychiatric patients were just insistent that they would be disturbed at night by unseen hands tugging at their bed sheets. There were a few that even believed were giving them that were causing their mental health issues. These spirits that were bothering them. A lot of these patients said, "It's not me. It's these spirits that are messing with me." How true that is, I don't know. It obviously they were already in there for some reason, but a lot of them claim that their continued psychiatric issues, if you will, were caused by these spirits bothering them. Now, a former hospital and psychiatric facility, this hotel, it later on you've got all this pain from all these people suffering and whatnot. Patients and staff have actually witnessed apparitions around the building and have even experienced poltergeist activities. They've experienced disembodied voices. There's constant reports of people saying that they feel like they're being watched when nobody else is around. That seems to be a very common occurrence there. Is this old patients that passed away there that are bugging guests that stay there? And I don't want to put anything bad again. If you want to go stay at this hotel, go stay at it. I'm sure it's a fantastic place. But there are reports of incidences such as this happening there at this hotel. Let's see. I think I have a little bit more here about it. Oh, yes. Oh, okay, here you go. This is what I want to talk about. So, on the top floor of the building, on the right wing of the building, there is said to be a woman apparition that can be seen watching people. So she watches people in the building. This has been reported multiple times that they see this woman and like she's watching you back. People have also reported having bed sheets pulled off them in the middle of the night. Is it from this woman or from other spirits? That we're not sure, but that's a very common one as well. These reports of bed sheets being ripped off in the middle of the night. People also say that when they stay there, they will suffer having bad nightmares when they're sleeping there. And they'll wake up in the middle of the night from having really severe like really bad nightmares. A lot of reports I saw, people claim, they'll stay there and they have really bad nightmares while trying to sleep. So that's unfortunate. Obviously, you're not physically being harmed or having anything physically happen to you, but that can be really scary in itself, where you're having a really extreme nightmare and you report it as to being from some sort of paranormal entity. That's really spooky. I personally myself have experienced things similar where I've had really bad dreams or bad nightmares, and the only thing I can think is it's coming from something such as that. I've had different weird dreams and nightmares, but I've had ones that are so odd and specific that that's kind of the only thing I can think it's coming from. That's all. That's my personal experience in relation to that. Now, there's one thing I want to talk about. There was actually a paranormal investigation in January 2011 by a group called the Los Muertos Spirit Seekers. This is the so three team members. They experienced unusual voices and whispering close to where they were at within the building. They also reported having distinct coolness near their bodies and that sense of being watched. So, like a lot of people that have stayed there have reported having a lot of they had a lot of these same reports during this investigation. After they reviewed all their evidence, a lot of these experiences were actually captured on digital voice recorders. So a lot of that, what would you call it, the EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon. They were able to capture a lot of these voice phenomenons on their digital recorders. They also did what they call a flashlight technique, which is an attempt at communication with spirits that involves the spirits answering questions through turning on and off flashlights. I know I've watched other shows that have done similar kind of things where we'll have some sort of like a light or something like that that will be like a very, a low voltage light that doesn't run a lot of power, something that runs on like a little like 3-volt watch battery or something. And they'll ask spirits questions and they'll ask them to turn the light on or make it flash however many times. So they did something similar to this in trying to communicate with spirits, and they were able to capture video of this, and it was successful. They were able to communicate with spirits and have them turn on and off this flashlight, basically with. And a lot of shows I've seen before similar to this are like very simple yes and no questions. I've seen some where it's like, they'll ask them some question, or is this who you are, or are you a ghost here? Whatever it might be, turn the light on once for yes, twice. That's just an example I'm coming up with, but I've seen stuff similar to that. So they did something very similar to this in an attempt to communicate with spirits there, and it was successful. So I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty neat, that sort of thing, and seeing that somebody did this paranormal investigation there at this hotel. So I think that's really cool. Again, don't be discouraged by this or by me. If you are staying there at the hotel or want to stay there, if you want to stay there to experience this stuff, hey, go for it. You're on your own though. Don't. Anyways, check it. I think it's a cool place. If you want to learn more about these places, check it out. A lot of cool history and a lot of interesting and some spooky paranormal stuff going on in some of these places. So pretty cool. Stuff like this at the Park Central Hotel, excuse me. I definitely would have to believe is happening again where you have investigations like this. I know some of it, some people might not believe in it. Some of it might be able to be debunked, but I like this sort of thing. I like reading about these things. I like watching shows on this, listen to podcasts about these sort of things. I think it's fun. I'll leave it at that. So I said I was going to talk about some of my own personal experiences that I've had in my own life that make me definitely believe in this sort of stuff. I've seen stuff, I've watched shows, whatever. Like I said, a lot of things can be debunked as not being real. A lot of old buildings, I've seen things where they'll debunk you know lighting issues, lights turning on and off to bad electrical things like that. I get that, but things that I have experienced myself, I can only believe that they are coming from the spirit world. One I'm going to talk about definitely, it has to do with my family, my personal family. I hope I don't offend any of you. Some of you may know in my family exactly what I'm talking about if you hear this. Some of you might not, but this is my personal experience that I have encountered. So when I was a teenager, my parents, I was actually 11, we'll go back a little bit longer. When I was 11, my parents had a house built in 1994 on the west side of Albuquerque. We moved in December when I was 11, of December of 1994. I was 11. We moved in there. We never had issues, never had any sort of weird things happen in this house. Never. It was totally calm, totally normal. I guess I should give you a description of the house so you have an idea of the story I'm going to tell you how it works. So when you walk in the front door, there was stairs right in front of you. It was a two-story house. That was my dog moving, hitting something. So when you walked into the front door, there were stairs that went straight up in front of you. They went about halfway. They had like a landing that was like give or take 8 feet up, and then they split off left and right. And to the left and to the right, there were bedrooms upstairs. There were four bedrooms. So there were two on the left side, two on the right side. The two on the left side were the bedrooms that my brother and I had. So my brother had one and I had the other one. To the right split of the stairs were two more bedrooms, and we used one as an extra bedroom, like a guest bedroom, if you will. And we used another one as like we had a couch in there. My dad had a desk in there with where he would do work and stuff like that. So almost like a lounge slash office, if you will. Now, the living room downstairs was behind the main stairwell, and we had the couch sitting where if you were sitting or laying on the couch, you could actually look up into the guest bedroom area and the this office, if you will, room. You could see up into kind of that area. Now, you could at the right angle, if you were sitting just right, you could look up into the doorway of the extra guest bedroom. If the door was open, you could see up into the guest bedroom. You could see the bed that we had in there and all that. So when we first moved in for years, it was totally fine. You'd go in there, people would come and stay with us, family, whatever. They'd sleep in there. We never had anything happen. Nothing weird. Nothing. No weird stuff occurrences ever happened. Now later, when I was a teenager, my great grandmother on my mother's side, so my mother's grandmother, she passed away. Now that she lived in Clovis, New Mexico, which is on the eastern central part of New Mexico near the Texas border. So we went out there for services and all that. My mother, from her grandmother passing, was given a piece of furniture. Now, from what I remember of this, it was a very nice, beautiful looking piece of furniture, very old, antique furniture. It was a makeup table. It had like drawers in it for putting your makeup. It had a mirror on the front of it. It was one of those like that the mirror could flip over. It was made out of wood. I don't remember how old it was. Being that it belonged to my great grandmother, who knows? It could have been a very old piece of furniture. But I remember it being just this really pretty wooden makeup table. And my mother got it. She inherited it after her grandmother passed. So we came back home to Albuquerque after the services. We had this piece of furniture, and my mother placed it into the guest bedroom, which it fit very well in there. It definitely suited that room and the furniture we had and everything. It went very well with it. It was a very pretty piece of furniture. Like I said, I really liked just the way it looked. It was a very nice piece of furniture. However, almost immediately after we got this piece of furniture into our home, things started to happen. Nothing bad, nothing, I wouldn't say anything evil, nothing like that. Things started to occur. We started to have, when you would go in that room, it would feel different. The air would feel different than the rest of the house. If it was winter, we'd have the heater running. If it was summer, we'd have the AC running. The room, it had a different feel, and it felt like a lot of people talk about with experiences like this. It felt cooler than any other room in the house. No matter what the AC or heater was set, depending on the time of year, it always felt colder in that room. As soon as you walked in that room, the bedroom, it felt colder. You could feel it. It just felt different. Also, we started noticing things of like we wouldn't see a light turn on or turn off, but like we'd be in a part of the house and we'd be in the bathroom up there by that room, or we'd be in that room, or we'd be in the other office room next to it and with a light on, and then we'd turn the light off as we leave. But then a few minutes later somebody would be like, oh hey, you left the light on in that room. Like, what? I did? No, I swear I turned it off. And you'd go up there and turn it off, go back and be kind of, hey, are you sure you turned that light off? It's on again. What? I know I did. I went up there and turned it off. We started seeing that very regularly, and it was most common within those rooms. I don't know if my dad or mom experienced this. I'm sure my mother did. Unfortunately, she's not here with us anymore. She passed away 2 years ago. Um, but I know my mother, she was very much into this kind of stuff, the very spiritual kind of things as well. I know her and we talked about some of the experiences that we'd had and shared some of the incidences. I shouldn't say incidences, but experience is a better word, that we experienced and things we heard and saw. So I'm sure she saw and heard some of this stuff herself. So yeah, that was a very common occurrence. Lights would be randomly on that we knew we turned off. Um, One really good one. I don't know if my brother remembers this, but we were in my bedroom, and I had a TV that was on like a little TV stand opposite the window in my room. Now the room that I had was, I don't remember the exact dimensions, but I mean it had to have been like, I want to say like 12 feet or something like that. Maybe it was a little bit bigger, from wall to wall to the window across. And I had this TV that was basically directly straight across from the window. Now I had a little Porsche Hot Wheel car that I would set on top of this TV. This is an older CRT TV, so it was a big, had this big box housing, and it was plastic on the top, the housing and everything. And it had a seam on the top of it where I would put this little Hot Wheel and I would rest the wheel in there so it wouldn't roll off because the top was at a slight angle. If you just set the car there, it would just roll off and fall on the carpet just in front of the TV. And it happened every so often. I'd bump into it or something. The TV would fall. The car, excuse me, not the TV. The TV wouldn't fall. It fortunately was so big and heavy it never fell. But the car would roll off and fall, and it would just fall like right in front of the TV, like a few inches or a foot right in front of the TV. And I'd pick it back up and put it back on. Well, I remember one time my brother and I were in my room, we were doing something, talking, I don't know, whatever. It was the middle of the day, and that little Hot Wheel car that I had there basically just shot across the room and hit the window. And we just kind of stopped what we were doing. We're like, did that just happen? Are, are we really? And I remember like trying to recreate it, like, and you'd have to throw this thing in order to get it to go. Like, it would have to be a hard throw, but you have to be a pretty good little toss to get the car to go across the room and hit the window. It hit it and hit the window very hard. So that was an unusual occurrence that I was like, all right, yeah, all right. It didn't just roll off and fall on the carpet right in front of us. It actually like flew off the TV. So that was an unusual one. Now there's another incident that we had a couple times. I don't remember. I don't know if my dad or my brother remember this either, but my bedroom sat right above the kitchen and dining room area. Not we had a formal dining room, but it was like, I guess you call it like a nook, if you will, like a breakfast or dining nook next to the kitchen. And my bedroom was right above that. Now there was a floorboard in my bedroom that if you were walking, the weight of a person stepping on it, it would squeak, and you could hear it when you were downstairs in the kitchen, or sitting there eating breakfast, in the breakfast nook, whatever. You would hear that floorboard squeak, and we knew it. I was like, okay, when in my room walking around, you could hear that floorboard squeak, and I remember multiple times when either I'd be home alone or home with just my brother, or everybody be downstairs doing something, and you would hear that floorboard squeaking like somebody was walking in my room. That was a very common one that we experienced a lot as well. Now the one that really brought it home for me, and really all this together, and this last one really made me a believer in what was going on, and I'll explain that here in a moment. I remember one night I was laying on one of our couches watching TV, and again, if you're laying the right way, and you can look up into that bedroom. I remember it was nighttime, and we had some lighting in the house. Like, it wasn't fully lit up, but we had lights on, so there was a lot of ambient light throughout the house. The living room had big giant vaulted ceiling, and there was a fan and lighting in there, so that light would kind of create a lot of ambient light through the rest of, like, up into those rooms and everything. I was watching something. I don't know what I was watching. I was watching TV, and I remember just like having the urge to look up there, almost like I mentioned in some of these other stories, like being watched by something or someone. I don't remember if others were home. I don't remember if it was just my brother and I, whatever, but nobody was upstairs. Whoever, whether I was by myself or whatever, I remember nobody was upstairs. So I was like, all right, whatever. So I glanced up there towards the room. Doors open, whatever I could see up in there. Like, all right, no big deal, nothing there. Look back to what I was watching. Within a few seconds, I glanced back up there and could clearly see, if you will, like a shadow figure, like a black mass standing in the doorway. There were no details, there was nothing specific, like no features, like facial features, no shape of hands or arms or anything like that. But it had vaguely the silhouette of a woman, is how I would describe it. But it was a black figure. And it was like we were just staring at each other. Now, this only lasted for a brief, maybe couple seconds, but to me it seemed like hours, or to be a cliche, an eternity, right? But I remember staring at this figure, and we were just looking at each other. Now, I never at any point felt like scared or uncomfortable or like it was bad, like or that like it was evil or anything, but just we were just looking at each other. That's what it felt like. Like it was just two people just like, yeah, we see each other. You're there, I'm here. All right, no big deal. I glanced back to whatever I was watching on the TV, glanced back up. It was totally gone. I could see back through the doorway into the room. There was nothing there. And that instant when I looked back up, also the sort of feelings I had and sensations I had were totally gone. It was just like everything was like just nice and calm and still. So for me, I believe that that was the spirit of my great grandmother with this makeup table that my mother inherited from her grandmother. Like I said, my great grandmother. I am a firm believer that that was her spirit, that she was there just, maybe just trying to say hi to us, communicating with us. Again, I never felt uneasy or uncomfortable, like in the sense of like, I never felt like it was evil or a bad spirit or anything like that, trying to do harm to us or anything like anything in that sense. It always felt okay and comfortable, even with some of these sensations and things we saw and heard. And especially with that last thing that I saw, it definitely made me feel like, yep, that's her. It's my great grandmother. She's just there checking in on us, making sure, we're doing okay, whatever, who knows. But I do believe that she came to us with this piece of furniture. Now, I don't know what happened to this piece of furniture. I believe my sister ended up with it. I'm not sure. I can't remember what happened to it, but that was my experience with it. To my brother and to my sister, if you remember this or if you have any experiences with it, let me know. Even if any my other family members have know what I'm talking about, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. I think that'd be pretty cool. So that was one of my personal experiences I've had that really makes me a believer in this sort of stuff. Now there's another one I had a few years later in my early 20s. My parents moved to a place called Placitas, New Mexico, which is northeast of Albuquerque. From the house that we used to live in that I just described, it's about 45 minutes away by car. It's up on the northern slopes of the Sandia Mountains where they live. It's kind of on the backside of the mountains. Really nice area. My parents, they bought a piece of property up there. It's a few acres. Very nice. I always liked it up there. Very, very pretty area. Just below the like the heavy forest line. They're like at 63, 6,400 feet, something like that. Anyways, very nice, pretty area. Some forest, but not super thick, dense forest or anything like that. But really nice area. So I remember my mom telling me this story one time that she was out there and hearing the voice of a woman like looking for something. And she realized after listening to it that she was looking for a child, like as if this woman was looking for her child. Who this woman was or who this child is, I have no idea. Not sure. And like I said, I remember my mom telling me about this, and I kind of thought, okay, I didn't really think of it. I thought at first I kind of blew it off, like, whatever, it's just a neighbor or something out there, like maybe her kid was playing and was running around. They have neighbors up there at this piece of property, but they're not right next to you, like in a suburban neighborhood. My dad has a neighbor that's straight across the road from him, but then all the other neighbors are kind of spread out a little bit because they all have property up there that are few acreage or whatever or more. So there's a lot of property you can walk around, and that's what my mom said. Like she was walking around and heard this. Again, I kind of blew it off like whatever. It's probably a neighbor that nearby she just heard that was far enough away, couldn't really hear detail, but just could still hear it until I experienced it myself. I was walking around one time out there on the property, just checking it out, and I heard this woman's voice, and I'm like, I look around, I'm like, and I responded, I'm like, hello, is there someone there? No response, no response back. So I thought, okay, whatever, it's got to be a neighbor out there. I'm just hearing off in the distance because it didn't sound like right immediately next to me. It just sounded like it was kind of around. But then I heard it again, but it sounded closer. I'm like, okay, so same thing. I'm kind of like, look, I stopped, I looked around, and just, hello, is somebody there? Again, no response. I waited a little bit. I just kind of stood there, looked around. I didn't feel anything. Nothing felt odd or anything. But then I heard it again. It was this sort of like, sounded like a woman, like in distress, looking for a child. But this time it sounded very close to me, like within, like, if there was somebody there actually talking, I should have been able to see them. So I'm looking around all directions. There's nobody near me. I'm completely by myself out in this area. I'm like, okay. Of course, I got spooked just because of it. I never felt like it was bad or evil or anything like that. I just got spooked in the moment because of it, because I was out there by myself, just out in this sort of area within this little forest, if you will. just totally exposed by myself hearing this, and there's nobody else near me. So I thought, all right, yeah, I'm gonna go. So I did. I left, and I never heard anything else. But that too was another one experience that I had that just definitely drove it home. Like, yeah, this stuff happens. I really do believe in this sort of stuff that our spirits will stay here for whatever reason. Maybe we have unfinished business, like this female voice that I heard and my mother told me that she heard. Maybe she lost her child in her life. Maybe the child was died unfortunately, and then later in her life she's still looking. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe yes, I believe that sometimes our spirits will stay here on this plane of existence, and are either they have unfinished business, or they maybe died or were killed in some tragic way, and now you have this negative energy. Anyways, I definitely believe in that sort of thing, that this sort of thing happens. I'm not trying to go out there and bring any evil spirits, into this world or anything. I'm not doing anything like that, but I do believe that there are things out there that can only be explained as our spirits, ghosts, whatever, staying around for whatever various reasons. So if you're a believer, awesome, cool. Let me know if you have some tales or stories like that. I would love to hear it. I find this stuff truly fascinating. I like listening to podcasts about similar stuff like this. I like watching documentaries. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you had a great Halloween. My kids enjoyed it. We had a lot of kids come out and do trick or treating. So a lot of cool costumes. So it was a great day. Today is, of course, the day after Halloween, which here in our part of the world, a lot of people know, celebrate Dia de los Muertos. Maybe I'll do an episode on that. That's a pretty cool celebration as well. So, anyways, thank you for listening. I'm gonna try to get some more stuff out this week. If you want to reach out to me, get in touch with me, the best place is going to be email at ourweirdworldpodcast@gmail.com. If you haven't found me on Facebook yet, check me out on Facebook, Our Weird World. I've had some more people that have joined recently, so thank you. Um, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Catch you next time.